Okay, we are live. It took a second there. It started spinning and I was like, uh-oh, is this it? Am I going to get the dreaded message? Your account has been restricted. This feature is not available. But it looks like we're good. It looks like we're live. Gilbert's over here staring at me. I think he wants to go outside. Let me open the door for him real quick. You guys get in here. Get in here. You want to go out here, bud? All right. Okay. And we're back. Okay. Boy, we got a lot to talk about today. Number of things in my story that I'm going to flip through and go over with you guys. You know, it's kind of like nothing new, and I don't mean like nothing new as in like the last week. I mean like nothing new as in human history. Nothing new that we weren't told about in texts that exist before we ever were born. Nothing new that's not in the Bible, nothing new that's not in the great works of fiction, which I will get more into pretty much immediately because that was one of the ways I spent my week this week. Bro, do you ever wear a shirt? Rarely. It's either a tank top or a hoodie. Yeah, man, I'm from Alabama. I am from Huntsville, Alabama. It's North Alabama. It's actually pretty close to Nashville, Tennessee. It's only it's really like 45 minutes from the border. Matter of fact. So I was walking around the block. This is how the story begins, you guys. I was just doing a normal Gilbert walk. And this was like, I don't know, 4 days ago. I think it was on Sunday. Yeah, it was on Sunday. I got to let Gilbert back in. He's sitting here at the door. Say hi to the little man. Say, hey, Gilbert. Okay, so thank you. I appreciate it. I didn't know you guys are going to be such a fan of the hat, but I actually am kind of not happy about it because I don't like wearing a hat inside. I think it's disrespectful. This is just traditional Southern etiquette. You're taught as a young man that wearing a hat indoors is inappropriate. And I'm one of the people who still believe in chivalry and etiquette. There's a great book on my bookshelf called How to Be a Gentleman. And it teaches you these things. It's supposed to. Stuff that used to be just like common knowledge, like do not wear a hat indoors. Say please and thank you. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. No, thank you. Shake hands. You know, all the stuff that we were taught is just part of how you live life correctly. Open the door for a woman when she's in front of you. Open the door for the elderly. Can I help you carry that? You know, basic stuff. I actually learned that stuff is not widespread throughout the United States. A lot of that is unique to the South. When I went out and lived in Portland for 7 years, I got a quick awakening that they have long since abandoned any kind of fondness of etiquette or chivalry. Like the women out there are hostile towards Southern gentlemen. I remember going on a first date, like when I first moved out there, I met some girl at a coffee shop. Get there, of course she's wearing like all black painted nails, tattooed up. And I'm like, oh man, is this what I just moved into? Is this what's going to be my life now? The dating scene in Portland's going to be a bunch of goth girls. That should have been an omen. I probably should have put it together then that like, oh man, probably fucked myself over, but I don't regret it. I spent 7 years out in Portland. But anyway, long story short, we get to the end of this date and we're leaving the cafe. And I go and open the door for her. And I'm like, I push the door open and I'm standing there waiting for her to go through it. And she just stares at me. And she's like literally refusing to go through the door. And like, I don't know what to say. I'm like, I don't say anything because I don't know what to say. Finally, she goes, I'm perfectly capable of getting the door myself. It's like, what are we doing with this? Why is your attitude that bad? What man hurt you to the point that you don't ever want a door to be opened for you again in your life by a man? Like that's just, I know nothing that bad happened to you that should create a stereotype of all men that whenever they do something chivalrous for you, that's an insult to your gender and an insult to your capabilities as a human being. Like the only way somebody ends up with that level of bitterness towards all men when they do something kind and thoughtful for you and you take it as an insult to your very capabilities that only happens because you've gone to a college where college professors are telling you that you live in a tyrannical patriarchy and that women are oppressed, and the only point how men see you is a baby factory and you're supposed to be making them sandwiches or whatever else. It's like there's no real world where a woman should have a door opened for them and them see it as an insult. Like, that's just ridiculous. And this was like my first week living in Portland. I should have known. I was like, wow, that was weird. I just kind of brushed it off, but I have many dating stories from my life on the West Coast. That is not unique. That is not the only one where I had to deal with feminism 4.0 or whatever version they're on now, where they're just actively hostile towards men and traditional masculinity, any kind of traditional gender roles. They are not down for that. They want that coming down. They want to pull that down with the system, down with the patriarchy. So anyway, I was walking around the neighborhood on Sunday, and somebody put out one of those little, like, what do you call them? Like a little public, not a library, but it's like a little cubby that people put books in. It's like a neighborhood book depository. What, you guys know what I'm talking about. You've seen them. They're kind of hipster, if I'm being honest, but I actually really like it. It's a good idea. And a neighbor, one of the people in the neighborhood, had a little thing nailed to a tree with enough space inside of it for probably 30, 40 books. And there were some books in there. And it just so happened that one of the books in this little cubby was none other than 1984 by George Orwell. And gosh, it had been probably 20 years since I watched the movie 1984, like the film adaptation. But I can't even say if I ever read the actual novel back when I was a teenager. I think I was supposed to, but I avoided all reading like the plague when I was younger. I hated it. I still don't love it, if I'm being honest. Like, I read because I have to read, because I know being intelligent is important and being articulate is important. So I read begrudgingly because I have to. But I knew the story of 1984, because I had seen the film, and people talk about Orwellian surveillance, censorship, thought police, doublethink. And so I knew all the concepts, and I roughly remembered the main character and his entanglement with the woman he meets, Julia. But I couldn't really remember how it ended, and I certainly didn't have like all the details. It's like what people always say. The book is always better than the film. You get much more context and you get much more background on the individual characters. So I was like, I'll crack this open. And I did this while walking Gilbert. I just opened it up, started reading. I read probably the first 5 pages of it while walking Gilbert outside. And I was like, this is going well. I like it so far. I'll keep reading a little bit when I get home. And so I get home and, keep reading. I'm like 20 pages into it, 30, 40. Suddenly I'm like 100 pages into it. I posted the story on my Instagram. And the book is 300 pages. And I was like, well, if I spent 2 hours this morning getting through the first 100 pages, theoretically, if I didn't really do much else today, if I just concentrated on reading this cover to cover, I probably could. And I'm like bragging over here, by the way. I never read books cover to cover. I'm not one of those guys who reads hundreds of pages of anything in a single day. But in this rare occasion, it was because all of the content of 1984, the plot, the protagonist, antagonist, the government, the fictional government, the culture that this person was living in, is it Winston Smith, I believe his name is the name of the protagonist. And, you have the Big Brother government in Oceania. It was all basically like reading current events. I mean, it was like seriously as if everything in the book came true. And the thing is if you only went back in time 20 years ago, when I first encountered 1984, when I watched the movie and when I was supposed to read it as a teenager, if you would have consumed the plot and the story and everything back then, it still would have seemed pretty sci-fi, pretty out there, like, oh man, I hope our government never gets that bad. Like, That's crazy. There's no way that would ever be like real life. And then I'm sitting here reading it, and I just like can't stop turning the pages because I'm like, yep, this is exactly how it works. This is the playbook. It's not fiction. This is how they do things. The concepts of doublethink, where we're expected to hold contradictory ideas at the same time. The concept of wrongthink, where you're just not allowed to entertain certain thoughts. The concept of committing thought crimes, and they actually have a military force respond to those, and they just vaporize them. They remove them from society. Anybody who commits a thought crime, they either rehabilitate them, they send them to a camp, they send them to a government facility to get re-indoctrinated with all of the right views, not the dissident views that the character in the book has. It was pretty frightening to read 20 years later that all of this stuff is not only true, but it's like out in the open. Like the historical revisionism, by the way. And we're going to talk about war also, because war was not part of the story that I remembered. I think the movie was much more about the tyrannical government, authoritarianism, not being able to say what you want, suppressing certain ideas, as I said, wrongthink and all that. I remembered all of that, but I did not remember, because I don't even think it's part of the movie, but like there's a book within the book that the protagonist is given, and it explains how the world works from this big brother perspective, from the not even 1%, but the 0.1%, the uber elite rich, the Rothschild kind of families, the royal families, the people who have really been running the world for hundreds of years. It explains how they see the world. The little book within a book does. And you only get to read a couple chapters of it, but that's plenty, because when you read it, it is so easy to understand that this is how the world works. This is truly how society is constructed. It's constructed in 3 layers. You have the proletariat, who are the worker bees, who simply live to the weekend, live for the weekend. They're expected to create whatever good or service in the economy to keep the whole thing moving. And they're expected to have babies to keep the whole thing moving. The book is 1984 by George Orwell. So the proletariat are the hundreds of millions of people living in the country. In America, we have 350 million people living here. The proletariat would consist of 349,500,000 or something like that. It's like literally 95% of the population would be the proletariat. Then you have a smaller slice of the population who are still not the elite, but they are what they call the inner circle. Or actually, the outer circle. These are the people who perhaps work in government, and so they're loosely aware of how things are being driven from the top down, and they're part of the engine that drives the military, the engine that drives the media, the engine that drives the social narratives. They're part of the printing presses. They're part of giving pornography to everybody. They're part of all of that, but they're still not actually decision makers. They're still not deciding what content goes out. They're simply responding to what the inner circle, the inner party is what they call it. There's an inner party, an outer party, and the proletariat. Proletariat are all of us worker bees. The outer party are the people who work for the government and the other agencies of the government. There's the thing called the Ministry of Truth and the Ministry of Peace. And how the book is constructed is that all of these things are intentional inversions of the truth. So the Ministry of Truth, for example, is the opposite of that. It is the Ministry of Propaganda and Lies. And the Ministry of Peace is the Ministry of War. Its intentional creation is to perpetuate ongoing, unending war. That's the purpose of the Ministry of Peace. The same way the Ministry of Truth is built to not sustain the truth, but to sustain what the party needs you to think is the truth. You guys hear Gilbert over here? He's getting agitated. These are sensitive subjects. Once you find out how the world actually works and that this is something that It's not unique to America, Europe, Africa, the Middle East, Asia. This is how all human societies have functioned ever since they began. And it is alarming, especially when you find out all of us, we're part of the proletariat. Okay, we're the proles, is what they call them for short, P-R-O-L-E-S. We're expected to simply receive what we hear on the news, where they tell us, hey, we have to go into this war, or when they tell us, hey, our economy's going into a depression, they tell us, hey, oh my gosh, there's a sudden pandemic. Can you believe it? You guys better take this vaccine. The proletariat are expected to just, for the most part, roll over and take whatever the party tells them without questioning. But the truly sinister part is that the party goes and changes history along the way. They revise history, the historical record. And so the protagonist of the novel, this Winston Smith guy, I believe, maybe it's Watson Smith, something like that. His job, he actually is in the outer party. So he's part of the government. And so he's not a prole. He's not one of these little meaningless peons. But his role working within the party starts to aware him of the corruption taking place. And it starts to aware him that the ministry of truth is actually the ministry of lies. And the ministry of peace is actually the ministry of war. And the reason he starts to understand this is because his job is essentially historical revisionism. His job is, it's kind of like Wikipedia editors today, where the government or the mega corporations or whoever else says, we need history to say this about this subject. Now, history played out differently. So-and-so was our enemy back then, and our enemy has changed. But now what we need is for everybody to consider this new enemy. We need them to think that these people have always been our enemy. So his job is to take all of these edits that need to be gone back and modified, whether they're speeches that politicians gave, newspaper articles that came out. He's expected to go and retrieve those historical archives and modify them to be in alignment with what the party needs people to think now. So when you think about fact checkers, right? If I say, who was responsible for 9/11? Well, we would all try to go dig up newspaper articles and we'd try to go figure out what the politicians were saying back then and all that. In his world, obviously, the book was written to be future thinking about how 1984 could end up. I think he wrote it in the late 40s or 50s. So, there's no internet back then, obviously. And so all of these physical, tangible artifacts, the newspapers, the magazines, the recorded speeches, and so on, they have to be edited so that when people go and do their research, they are consistent with what the party thinks today. So even though we used to be friends with East Asia for decades, well, because the party wants to go to war with East Asia right now, when people go and try to look up the historical record, it needs to say that actually we've always hated East Asia. That was a Freudian slip because I was thinking about how we're handling Russia right now. So this is why I wanted to bring it up, because it's the same strategy. America has no real beef with Russia. They're on the other side of the world. They have an entire nuclear arsenal that keeps them protected. We're not trying to start any real wars with them because it would be catastrophic for both of us and the rest of the world. They have their own self-sustaining economy, their own natural resources. They have a history far, far longer than America does. They actually have an identity, an ethnic identity that they care about protecting. They understand that they should not change the demographic of Russia. Russia should stay Russian. And there's multiple ethnicities within Russia, but still, you get the general drift. But in this story, the guy, the protagonist, is continually going and finding these contradictions where, man, they're asking me to go back and edit this timeline, But I know that that's a lie. Like, I know that these people were not actually our enemies back then. Or I know that that's not actually what they said. Another example is, if this is from only 4 years ago, I'm sure you guys will remember this and certainly feel its relevancy. Do you guys remember when Dr. Fauci and President Obama and the Secretary of State and the people running the World Health Organization, Wojcicki or whatever her name was, the NIH, they would all go on national television and they would tell us the vaccine is 99% effective. It is completely safe. There are no side effects to worry about. That was all about the vaccine. And then they were talking about the virus. They said this is extremely lethal. Everybody needs a vaccine. Doesn't matter what age you are. Doesn't matter what level of health you have. Everybody needs the vaccine. And the vaccine is totally safe and effective, right? We all remember they gave that speech over and over and over. It was on every single media outlet all day, every day for years. And then after our lived experience started to accumulate evidence that we can just see with our eyeballs, people were not dropping dead left and right in the street. Our coworkers were all still alive. Most of our family was still alive. The survival rate of getting COVID is like 99%. And conversely, the vaccines were starting to show a track record of side effects, especially amongst pregnant women and myocarditis in young people, that couldn't be denied. Like, the evidence was starting to come in that said these people lied to us. And so what did they do? What did the government, CDC, World Health Organization, the NIH, CNN, Fox News, what did they all do? Did they say, hey, we got it wrong. You know, we were scared, we panicked, you know, maybe we overreacted, we got it wrong. Sorry. They could have done that. That would have been bad enough if they did that, but they didn't. For the next 1 or 2 years, they obstinately said, we never said that. We never said you had to get a vaccine. We never said it was that deadly. We said it was up to you. It's like, no, we have the tapes. And this is the beauty of living in the internet age. We had the tapes. We have you saying that if you don't get the vaccine, you're going to get fired from your job. And if you get COVID and you don't have the vaccine, then you're going to get somebody's grandmother killed. And all the emotional blackmail and financial blackmail and reputational blackmail that was nonstop in all of our lives. We couldn't go to the gym. We couldn't go out to eat. Couldn't go to church. People lost their businesses because of this. They actually tried to do a full about face and say, well, we never said you had to stay home. We never said you had to get the vaccine. We never said the virus was that deadly. This is 1984. Like, this is the playbook. They just full on deny what they said in the past, even when you have the historical evidence to prove it. So this leads me to the censorship, because we all know what happened next. We all had the receipts to prove, sorry, Joe Biden, you did get on the national news and you did say these things, and so did Fauci, and so did the White House press secretary, and so did Anderson Cooper and Wolf Blitzer, and so did Donald Trump, and so did everybody else. Well, what did they do when they had to acknowledge that all of us had the receipts? You're lying to us. You're trying to change the story 2 years later. They cracked down on censorship. They tried to remove us from society. The people who were problematic, who actually had the evidence and the articulation to present that these people are liars, unapologetic liars, morally rotten people who did this for profit or for status and influence, because they were being blackmailed or who knows why. They intentionally lied. They knew they were lying. And then they lied about lying. And then when people confronted them about their lies, what did they do? What did the party do? They destroyed your reputation. They silenced you. They banned you from whatever social media platform you were trying to use to spread the truth. If you were trying to go and post the videos, the compilations of Psaki, remember Psaki, the redhead? Like, here's Psaki saying how dangerous this all is, and we have to get vaccines, and companies should push to fire people who don't get them. And here's the same people, here's Fauci telling us that we have to wear a face mask because they're proven to be effective. We have to do 6 feet distancing apart, social distancing. We can't go to church or the gym. Well, if you kept on, you just got removed from society, exactly like in 1984. Now, in 1984, it's obviously a hyperbolic example, but they quite literally vaporize you. They kidnap you, take you to a government facility, attempt to brainwash you and break your will through torture and other means. And if you don't think that's happening today, I promise you it's happening. It's happening. It just depends on how important you are. The more important you are, the more methods they have to use to silence you and remove you from society. That's when they'll actually dig into your personal life, dig up some kind of blackmail, something you did wrong, somebody you hurt. They'll get them to flip against you. They'll find some comment that you made and use that to destroy your public reputation. And with the reputational harm, you'll lose your career. You lose your career, then you lose your home. And so it's just on and on and on. And so I was like sitting here on Sunday, just flipping through the pages, like, I can't put this down because it's so prophetic. All of the censorship, the wrongthink, requiring people to possess doublethink, where you're expected to believe that COVID is the most dangerous thing in the world, but looking around you, everybody seems to be fine. People are getting a cold, they're coughing, they have to take a couple of days off of work, but that's it. The vaccines, it was required doublethink. You had to believe that they were safe and effective, but whenever you actually talk to people who had gotten the vaccines, they were telling you that, honestly, I got more sick from the vaccines than from COVID. And then as the VAERS system came out, the vaccine adverse effect reporting system, they started to get 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 reports of these side effects coming from the vaccine. So I think you guys get it in terms of the censorship, wrongthink, where if you wanted to go out there and say, hey, I have some skepticism, that was wrongthink. You weren't allowed to do that. Simultaneously, this all overlapped with the election. You'll remember that they used COVID to force everybody to do mail-in ballots. In the 2016 election, mail-in ballots only consisted of about 35% of all ballots cast in the election. In the 2020 election, during COVID, that number shot up to 70%. And so this one statistic alone shows you the margin of error and the margin of manipulation in the 2020 election that made it so susceptible to interference in all types of ballot harvesting, fake ballots from dead family members, stolen ballots. You didn't even have to go in person to submit the ballots. It was all kinds of fucked up. So the election interference, if you pointed out, hey, just this mail-in ballot thing makes me uncomfortable, and some of the other discrepancies with the votes coming in the middle of the night and flipping over tens of thousands of votes to Biden at the last minute. Everybody went to sleep thinking that Donald Trump had it in the bag and was going to win. And then tons and tons of votes come in the middle of the night. It doesn't matter whether or not the voting and the individual ballots and all that actually function or not. We live in a country where we have freedom of speech. And so if you had criticisms about the election, if you thought it was fraudulent, if you just wanted something to be counted more diligently, you had every right to say that. But that's not what they needed you to believe. That's not what they needed the narrative to be. I mean, I'm sure you remember Joe Biden going out and saying this was the safest election and most accurate election in all elections history. Like, this is where it's just so overtly, obviously propaganda. It'd be one thing to say, like, you know, it was a tenuous election. It was different than the ones in history. I understand why people had some problems with it. You know, we just got to move forward. Like, that could have been the message. That would have been an honest message, even if he stole it or if he didn't. You could just say that. But instead, they go, this was the most accurate and non-interfered with election in history. It's like, I just know that's not true, but you're trying to tell me that I have to think it's true. And the same thing with all of the COVID stuff. And so that's the concept of doublethink. The wrongthink, as I mentioned before, is holding any of these ideas. You are supposed to develop an aversion to thinking anything that is not in agreement with what you're hearing on the news or what the government is telling you. It's a lot like the Holocaust. If you want to go down this subject tonight, which we usually end up doing, talking about the Jews and the Holocaust and all this crap, it's the same thing. If you even start getting an idea that maybe some of those details about the Holocaust, maybe they're not accurate, and maybe they are intentionally not accurate. Maybe they exaggerate the death count and they exaggerate certain particular details of the Holocaust for a reason. It's not like, oh, we just accidentally recorded the wrong thing. The atrocity propaganda, which is yet another thing that 1984 includes, is meant to dehumanize a certain party. In this case, we're talking about Nazis, Germans, nationalist people, anybody who stands for their nation not being forced to participate in the international usurious Rothschild cabal of banking, and standing up for their demographic identity, their ethnic identity. We're supposed to correlate those things with the Holocaust, the Nazis, Hitler. And whenever you hear those concepts of nationalism, white pride, criticizing Jews, you're supposed to go, whoa, wrong think, don't think that. That's the last time somebody thought those things that caused 6 million Jews to die. The last time somebody had wrong think about the Jews, they got turned into lampshades of human skin and bars of soap. So that concept of wrong think, once you're aware of how it works, it is supposed to be a hair trigger that is built into you where you actually shut down your own thought process. They don't even have to censor you. You have been so psychologically conditioned by society, by the education system, by the media, by the government, that you are literally afraid to think things. It's a thought crime. So that's why I couldn't put the book down. I was like, you know what? Everything here that was predicted, it is real life. It's all 100% real. Every single bit of it. And so there's one section that I mentioned before about war that I was not expecting to come across in the book. I didn't remember that this was part of the plot. I mentioned before, I understood censorship, wrongthink, doublethink, thought police. I understood all that. But the nature of war, and I mentioned before, the construction of society in these 3 tiers, this is a little difficult to explain, so I'm going to try. And I've only explained it one other time, so I'm still working on how to articulate it best. What the book outlines, the book within the book, meaning the book that is written by the elites who have identified this is how humanity works. There's the upper echelon of the ultra-billionaire class, more like trillionaire class, who are deciding which wars happen all over the globe, who are destroying currencies whenever they want to, who are deracinating nations whenever they want to, who are instituting governmental coups whenever they want. Those people accurately diagnosed that there is a production issue when the proles, all of us worker bees, this day and age, because of the advancement of technology, we have actually created the technology to have a surplus of all of our needs. We have the ability all over the world, not just in the Western world, not just in America, Europe, etc. Throughout the world, we have the technological means to produce far more than everybody needs. We have enough to make homes for people, food for people, clothes for people, water for people, medicine, healthcare. It all exists. Not just break even, we actually have a dramatic surplus of it. But the problem is, if you allow people to actually keep that surplus, let's just take America for example, if you allow people to keep their entire income, all 100% of their wages, then they would slowly start to accumulate all of those things. They would have a farm, they would have a lot of land, they would have an ability that they could eventually build to be self-sustaining, no longer having to work, no longer having to participate in society and be one of the cogs in the engine. they could actually accumulate enough resources to extricate themselves from the rat race. This is not good for the upper 1%. They need people continually producing so that they don't accumulate resources themselves and eventually use that accumulation of resources to overthrow them. Does that make sense? If we're all actually keeping 100% of our income and not having, in my case, I have to give away 40%. This is going to piss me off talking about it. Because of my income level, I'm blessed. I'm not sitting here complaining about being in the upper income bracket. But once you are in that point, and I'm not a millionaire, like I don't even have $1 million. I'm just pointing out, once you're above six figures in America, all taxes combined, sales tax, state tax, federal income tax, you're talking about losing 40% of the money you make before you ever even touch it. I can only imagine what I could do with 40% more money every single year. I could pay off my house very quickly. I could have a nice nest egg for my future family. I could buy land. I could buy other assets that would be appreciating and so on. And if there were a lot of people like me who are accumulating wealth, we could also be stockpiling other means that would help us in eventually standing up for ourselves and saying, hey, our interests matter. What we care about, our priorities in this country matter more than yours. We are the majority. We are the 80 to 90% of this country. And so if we were actually allowed to accumulate resources, that would cause a substantial risk to the rulership class. And so they have to find a way to burn the surplus resources that all of us technologically advanced societies are creating. It's not good. They can't allow us to accumulate resources. This is the purpose of taxation. And it is also the purpose, more importantly, of ongoing war. And this is what the book really talks about. When the 1% figured out the threat of these accumulation of resources, they were trying to figure out, what do we do then? Like, we can't just show up to people's houses and start burning their shit. We can't show up and start seizing their property. I mean, that's communism. They've tried that, and we know how bad that goes. So they said there has to be a way where all of this surplus resources that are being created are burned up somehow, that the economy and all the people are generating. When you look at war, it actually fits like a glove when it comes to burning up resources, burning up all those dollars. Like, we have spent trillions of dollars on the wars in just the Middle East. I'm not talking about the world wars before that and every other war that's happened. Just the wars in my lifetime, in the last 40 years, we've spent trillions of dollars of our taxpayer money that we earned through our careers. We then gave back to the government because they said what they had to do with it was drop bombs on Iraq, drop bombs on Afghanistan, drop bombs on Syria, right? And so this is how they pull all of that overproduction, that surplus. They milk it back out of society, and they literally burn it up. Now, of course, they get the added benefit of, first, they take away what we would need to stockpile ourselves to eventually overthrow them. That's one benefit. But then, because they're using this for the purpose of war and destruction, they get to destabilize their enemies, and they get to take over their resources. You know, this is pretty self-explanatory in the Middle East. But it's also true in Africa as well. So it's a win-win for them. They get to go and seize assets from these other places while keeping our own population away from actually accumulating the resources we need as individuals and communities to ever do anything about it. And so wars serve an ongoing, perpetual purpose of the government. So when you're an American right now and you're saying, hold on, why are we at war with Russia through Ukraine, using Ukraine as a proxy state? I think they said 500,000 Ukrainians have died at this point. Why are we participating in 500,000 Ukrainians having to die? The argument goes, according to our government, that every Ukrainian that dies in this altercation with Russia is one American that doesn't have to die. We are essentially depleting Russia's military, their tanks, their missiles, their guns and all that, their ammunition. We're essentially, what they claim is we are burning up Russia's resources and we're fighting a battle over there so that we don't have to fight it over here. But that's completely ridiculous because Russia has no desire whatsoever to come to America and initiate a war on our soil. It's not like that. Like, they have no desire to do that. They're not trying to take over the world like CNN tells you they are. So I was kind of surprised and very, I don't know, like, I hadn't thought about this whole surplus having to be burnt up on an ongoing basis perspective and how war fits that purpose so perfectly with multiple benefits. Like I said, you get to take the resources of whoever you just bombed the shit out of. You get to strategically place your military like pieces on a chessboard all throughout the world. And that's what we've done over the last 40 or 50 years. The neocon era, we have the number, they don't officially publish it. I watched a great interview Tucker Carlson did the other night with this guy. I don't even remember his name. But he was saying that America at this point has like at least 70 or 80 military bases throughout the world. And I mean like per country. And many of them multiple military bases in single countries. But of the 220 or whatever countries of the world, America has bases in like 80 of them, which is crazy. Like, that's essentially like trying to play the actual board game of Risk, where you try to have pieces on the board in all these different places. So I burned through the entire 300-page book in one day, and it was a great read. I highly suggest, if you guys haven't read it yourself, go and read it. I didn't spoil it. You know, there's a lot of good stuff in there with the romantic interest, this young woman named Julia. It gave me some hope, okay? Because listen, the main character is like 38 or 39, and I'm 37, and he goes and gets himself a nice little 26-year-old. Perfect. Like, that's how it's supposed to be, right? We're supposed to have young, fertile women to create large families. Men who are in that part of their life, who have already secured the resources, who have come to understand the world. Like, I didn't know any of this when I was in my 20s. I can't imagine trying to keep a woman safe from the evils of the world. I wasn't even Christian in my 20s. So it's like, I didn't have the right spiritual compass, moral compass. I didn't understand the government. I didn't understand any of this. And so, I mean, it's so frustrating. Can I make a confession to you guys? You guys are going to love this. Ultimate frustration. This is like life on extreme difficulty mode for me. It was either Monday or the day before that. I can't remember. But I went to Walmart, and there was this cute little greeter at the door. I got my groceries. I rung them up. I was on the way out, and I'd seen her there before. And I was like, okay, she's cute. You got to shoot your shot, man. Hey, you're trying to find your wife out here, trying to have a family. And so I sparked up a little conversation with her, said I'd seen her in there several times, and she's cute as a button. Do you have a boyfriend? This girl says, oh, no, I'm only 20, and I'm in college. And, you know, I'm really flattered, but, you know, I'm only 20. I'm not looking to get settled down and everything. So I got shot down by a Walmart greeter, okay? This is the world that we're living in. First of all, most people would condemn me and say that I'm some kind of pervert for wanting to date a 20-year-old woman. It's like, are you guys just retarded? Like, who thinks it's inappropriate for a man of any age to date a woman who is in her peak prime age for having a family? If that's his intent to recreate, then picking a 38-year-old woman to marry is not the right idea. So anyway, I got shot down by the Walmart greeter. It was pretty funny, though, honestly. I was laughing about it for the rest of the day because I have become desensitized to rejection. Like, this is hard for a lot of young men to get comfortable with, but rejection is a part of life. You're going to go through job interviews where you never hear back, where they give you feedback and you take it personally, Women are going to shoot you down. Women are going to get into a relationship and then leave. And it's not unique to women. Men do it too. Men reject women, and it happens on both sides. But this fear of rejection is something that we just don't have time for. Like, we seriously do not have time to sit around going, oh man, I'm going to feel really awkward for these 30 seconds that I try to shoot my shot. So I'm just not going to do it. And what the truth is, you guys know what the real truth is. It's not so much that you're worried about how awkward it's going to feel during those 30 seconds, that you're going to stumble, you're going to start stuttering, your face is going to turn red, you're going to feel awkward, whatever. I'm sure you're worried about that, but what you're much more worried about is getting rejected. Because that means you're going to go home and you're going to feel sorry for yourself. You're going to go home and you're going to think about, what was it? Am I not attractive enough? Did I say the wrong thing? Did I have something in my teeth? Why did she say no? Like, what's wrong with me? That's what I know from having experienced that self-doubt, especially before I got into fitness, especially before my career really developed. If you actually are skeptical as to what you have to offer, you will take it personally. If you actually think that, you know what, you're not the best looking person, and you know why you're not the best looking person, because you've neglected yourself. You haven't groomed yourself appropriately. You haven't accumulated muscle. You're not keeping thin. You're not taking care of your teeth so that they're nice and white and nice to look at. That stuff's on you. And so what you're afraid of is that when you go and get rejected, it's going to be a call for accountability. It's going to say, now I have to think about, was it me? Like, what do I think she would have hoped to have seen? And so if you cannot go through that checklist of how do I look, what do I have to offer, and be confident with each of those, then you're going to sit around dwelling on the negativity of getting rejected. When you're me and you've already been rejected a million times and you've already optimized your physique and you know you're a handsome guy because you've worked on all these things and you have a very successful career that you know that's not the problem. I know that this straight up is her. Like maybe she has a type and I'm just not that physical type. But we heard, she told me, I'm 20 years old. I'm in college. I want to focus on that. I don't want to settle down. I don't want to be thinking about family and marriage. And so that's not stuff that I have to take as I did something wrong. She rejected me because I was inadequate. This is an important thing. I want all the guys who hear this to really absorb that when you get rejected, it's a good thing. It's going to cause you to go through a reflection process of taking inventory of who you are and what you have to offer and checking to see how confident you are in each of those things. Because guess what? If you're sitting around thinking at the end of that night, 6 hours later, after getting rejected by the girl at the gym, the girl at Walmart, the girl at school, the girl at work, whatever, and you're going into detail and you're sitting there saying, I wonder if she rejected me because I have man tits. I wonder if she rejected me because my arms are flabby. Okay, well, if that's true, if that's the reason she rejected you, that's not her fault. That's not her being a bad person. Those are things that you can improve. That's fully under your control. Now, what will not help you is to obsess over things that are not in your control. If you sit around 6 hours later thinking, I wonder if she rejected me because I'm not tall enough. Okay, that's just not productive. That's not going to help you guys. I wonder if she rejected me because the shape of my nose, the color of my eyes, immutable characteristics, stuff you can't change. You shouldn't be dwelling on that. You should be actively going through the things I mentioned before that are in your control, what you have to offer, the physical appearance that you actually can optimize, and thinking, have I actually put forth the intentional effort to optimize those things? Because if I haven't, then that's on me. So just a couple of tips on how to deal with rejection and reduce the rate at which you are rejected. And you'll find this, it's not rocket science. As you maximize all of your attributes and what you have to offer, you'll get rejected less. Wow, who would have known? But it's also just a little bit of consolation for you guys that this is the world we live in currently. Women are not thinking about marriage and kids. They just aren't. I can show up at a fucking Walmart and say, hey, would you like to never work again? Would you like to date an actual fitness model? Would you like to serve God by having a large family? Would you like to move into a 5-bedroom house with a pool? Would you like to have a Mercedes or whatever else you want? Would you like all of that? And they will actually tell you to your face, no, I don't think so. I think I would rather date some video addicted nerd who is also in college, has no idea where he's going in life, hasn't experienced anything. Or I would rather play the hookup game on the dating apps. It's unfortunate, but women are not looking for leaders. That's the point that I'm making. Women they want somebody who they feel is roughly equal to them or beneath them. It's pretty sad. I actually posted a meme on my stories. You guys probably saw it, where it's like a day in the life of a 20-year-old stay-at-home boyfriend. Can you believe this is even a thing? Like, what kind of loser, leech, imbecile is 20 years old with no job, allowing his girlfriend to go and make a living for the two of them? It was just so cringe to watch. Like, I felt like humiliated for the guy to watch it. And he talks about it. He's like, so I swept the porch. And that's like the one thing he did that day. That's the one productive thing he did, was he swept the back porch. Otherwise, he played video games and slept and waited for his girlfriend to get home. And she brought him McDonald's or something like that. And then later on, she's asking him, hey, do you want me to order a pizza for us tonight? Obviously, she's paying for all of this. And the sad thing is, guys, I know for a fact that a lot of guys would see that and be like, winning. Can I sign up for that? I don't want to work. I just want to sit at home and play video games. What, somebody else is going to pay for my food in my house? And it's the girl that I get to have sex with? That's awesome. No. No. That is not awesome. That is not what men are supposed to be. Men are supposed to be the leaders in the relationship, the protectors and the providers. And when a man remains in a state of inversion, where he is the dependent and the woman is the security, his masculinity erodes and he is not continually bettering himself. He's not getting more professional experience. He's not actually becoming a man. He's still basically a child sucking on his mom's breast. It's like the Peter Pan syndrome, where we have an entire generation of men who really do not want to grow up. And sadly, I mean, it's a direct tie to feminism. Women have taken on the responsibility of being protectors and providers because they think it's somehow standing up for themselves. And then the retarded young men are like, okay, well, look, if you're going to work and you're going to bring home the money, then I guess I don't need to be a man. I guess I can just sit here like a snail and slowly die, never becoming a man. More like sit here like a child and wait for mommy to get home and ask if I can have my allowance whenever I want to buy something. So we can't have that. Like, that is not how we get out of this bind that we're in as a nation. We need men being men. And because my account is 85% men, I do have some women followers, but I can check the demographics. I can see who my followers are. And 85% of my followers are men. And so, yeah, we can talk about how women need to change. They need to shed feminism, but they're not watching this show. There's some followers, I know, but women will follow us. When the men change, because women are biologically followers and not leaders, they will fall into line. They just have to see confident, competent men taking the lead. And if you're a 20-year-old stay-at-home boyfriend, then you're part of the problem. So you got to do the opposite of that. You got to become educated, disciplined, hardworking, and optimize yourself in every way that you can. Because the women are not going to bring about this revolution that we need. What revolution in human history was led by women? I'll be here all day waiting for you to respond because there are precisely 0 of them. That's not how revolutions occurred. It's never worked that way. We need a nucleus of men. We need tens of thousands, maybe 100,000 men who are highly educated, competent, and confident. They understand that all of this is spiritual. They are Christian men, and they understand that we have a family to protect, our family being our people, our white European people, and we actually have a nation to protect. That is the harmony of those two things, the Christian faith and the European culture. We have to preserve both of those, and we can't expect women to do that. That's not going to happen. We know the story of Adam and Eve. We know women's weaknesses. We know how women vote. Look at the voting records. Women vote 70% Democrat. There's a reason why women could not historically vote, because they are not capable of making rational decisions for large groups of people. And this is at a biological level, their hormonal profile, their endocrine system. The ratio of estrogen to testosterone is obviously different for men versus women, and those hormones drive a different behavioral template. Men have the aggression, men obviously have the physical differences to facilitate the required confrontations that have to come about. It's all tied together. It's just absolutely crazy that people deny it, that the two genders are somehow interchangeable. They're not. Women are not smaller men, okay? It's just, I know I don't have to explain this to you guys. And roll tide, my friend, absolutely. Roll tide, for those who don't know, is the motto of the Alabama football team. Been a lifelong Alabama college football fan. It's really just for my family. It wasn't when I was growing up. You know, I was a normie. I didn't know any better. I was all about football and watching it on TV and stuff and enjoying playing it. But obviously in my red pill adult years, I know that college football and professional football and all sports on TV are simply the bread and circus. Sadly enough, it's 4 hours of packaged propaganda and distraction. This guy is bonkers. Goodbye. Not wasting time with some guy that has been hurt by a woman, obviously. All right, see you later. Not going to mourn. If you can't understand that men and women are not interchangeable and that we have different hormonal profiles which result in different behavior and different physical bodies, then you just don't have eyeballs. Like, I don't know what to tell you. So we got to get the women out of government. We got to get women out of education. We got to get them out of all the leadership roles. That's just the facts. They shouldn't be in the military, obviously. We need men leading society. It's not to say that women should have no voice whatsoever, but the woman's voice is supposed to be in the home. She's supposed to be providing the emotional support for the family, keeping the household a home, not just a house. Anyway, all right, I got to wrap this up. We got a minute and a half left, and I got to move on to cooking dinner. Kind of a wild live stream tonight. You know, I talked a lot about 1984 and war, censorship, thought police, wrongthink, doublethink. And then we got into rejection and how to improve yourself, how to take it, you know, when you get rejected, use it as feedback. Use it as a time to assess if you've done everything you can. And chances are you have not. Thanks for hanging out with me, you guys. I appreciate it. Thanks for sharing your feelings, King. Hey, no problem. I'm always a very transparent guy. I wear my heart on my sleeve. Look, getting shot down by a fucking Walmart greeter is not pleasant, I promise you. But there's value in sharing that story. It provides a little bit of context into just what we're dealing with, that you can literally show up with the fucking winning lottery ticket and they'll be like, no, I'd rather go to school for 4 years so I can then spend 8 more years building a career and be 30 years old and single and childless, and then maybe I'll consider settling down. It's like, okay, well, all right, sorry. I know I didn't realize I was just like some schlup I thought I had a good career, and I thought that I had a 1% physique, and I thought that I was intelligent and educated and humble too. But I guess I was wrong. I was wrong about all this stuff. So anyway, I hope you guys have a good night. I got to go cook up some ground beef. I'm probably going to do like sloppy joes or something. I don't know. But I will talk to you again soon.